This is a continuation of The Covered Wagon by Emerson Hough, comprising chapters 40 through 45 and the end. Chapter 40. Oregon, Oregon. The freakish resolves of the old-time trapper at least remained unchanged for many days. But at last one evening he came to Molly's wagon, his face grim and sad. "Miss Molly," he said, "I'm come to say goodbye now. Hit's for keeps." "No? Then why? You are like an old friend to me. What don't I owe to you?" "Ye don't owe nothing to me yit, Miss Molly. But I want ye to think kindly o' old Jim Bridger when he's gone. I allow the kindest thing I kin do for ye is to bring Will Banion to ye." "You are a good man, James Bridger," said Molly Wingate. "But then, you see, Miss Molly, I had 6 quarts of rum I got at Boise. Some folks says rum is wrong. Hit ain't. I'll tell you why. Last night I drinked up my lastest bottle of that Hudson's Bay rum. Hit war right good rum. And as I lay looking up at the stars, alder once it hit come to me that I was just exactly, no more and no less, just ter the har, as drunk I was on the leetle spree with Kit at Laramie. Warn't that fine? And warn't hit useful? Natural, bein' jest even up, I done thought o' everything I'd been forgettin'. Hit all come to me as plain as a streak o' lightnin'. What it was Kit Carson told me I know now, but no one else shall know. No, not even you, Miss Molly. I can't tell ye, so don't ask. Now I'm goin' on a long journey, and a resky one. I can't tell ye no more. I reckon I'll never see ye agin, so goodbye." With a swift grasp of his hand, he caught the dusty edge of the white woman's skirt to his bearded lips. "But James—" Suddenly she reached out a hand. He was gone. One winter day, rattling over the icy fords of the road winding down the Sandy from the White Cascades, crossing the Clackamas, threading the intervening fringe of forest, there broke into the clearing at Oregon City the head of the wagon train of 1848. A fourth of the wagons abandoned and broken, a half of the horses and cattle gone since they had left the banks of the Columbia east of the mountains, the cattle leaning one against the other when they halted, the oxen stumbling and limping, the calluses of their necks torn, raw and bleeding from the swaying of the yokes on the rocky trail, their tongues out, their eyes glassy with the unspeakable toil they so long had undergone. The loose wheels wobbling, the thin hounds rattling, the canvas sagged and stained, the bucket under each wagon empty, the plow at each tailgate thumping in its lashings of rope and hide. The train of the covered wagons now had, indeed, won through. Now may the picture of our own Ark of Empire never perish from our minds. On the front seat of the lead wagon sat stout Molly Wingate and her husband. Little Molly's cart came next. Alongside the Caleb Price wagon, wherein now sat on the seat, hugging a sore-footed dog whose rawhide boots had worn through, a long-legged barefoot girl who had walked 1,200 miles since spring, trudged Jed Wingate, now grown from a tousled boy into a lean, self-reliant young man. His long whip was used in baseless threatenings now, for any driver must spare cattle such as these, gaunt and hollow-eyed. Tobacco protuberant in cheek, his feet half bare, his trousers ragged and fringed to the knee, his sleeves rolled up over brown and brawny arms, Jed Wingate now was enrolled on the list of men. "Gee, whoa, haw! You buck and star! Get along there, damn you!" So rose his voice, automatically but affectionately. Certain French Canadians, old-time engagés of the fur posts, now become habitants, landowners, on their way home from Sunday chapel, hastened to summon others. "The families have come," they called at the falls, as they had at Portland town. But now, though safely enlarged at last of the confinement and the penalties of the wagon train, the emigrants, many of them almost destitute, none of them of great means, needed to cast about them at once for their locations, and to determine what their occupations were to be. They scattered, each seeking his place, like new trout in a stream. Chapter 41. The Secrets of the Sierras. Sam Woodhull carried in his pocket the letter which Will Banion had left for Molly Wingate at Cassia Creek in the Snake Valley, where the Oregon Road forked for California. There was no post office there, yet Banion felt sure that his letter would find its way, and it had done so, save for the treachery of this one man. Naught had been sacred to him. He had read the letter without an instant's hesitation, feeling that anything was fair in his love for this woman, in his war with this man. Woodhull resolved that they should not both live. He was by nature not so much a coward as a man without principle or scruple. He did not expect to be killed by Banyan. He intended to use such means as would give Banyan no chance. In this, he thought himself fully justified, as a criminal always does. But hurry as he might, his overdriven teams were no match for the tireless desert horse, the wiry mountain mount, and the hardy mules of the tidy little pack train of Banyan and his companion Jackson. These could go on steadily where wagons must wait. Their trail grew fainter as they gained. At last, at the edge of a waterless march of whose duration they could not guess, Woodhull and his party were obliged to halt. Here, by great good fortune, they were overtaken by the swift pack train of Greenwood and his men, hurrying back with fresh animals on their return march to California. The two companies joined forces. Woodhull now had a guide. Accordingly, when, after such dangers and hardships as then must be inevitable to men covering the gruesome trail between the Snake and the Sacramento, he found himself late that fall, arrived west of the Sierras and in the gentler climate of the Central Valley, he looked about him with a feeling of exultation. Now surely, fate would give his enemy into his hand. Men were spilling south into the valley of the San Joaquin, coming north with proofs of the Stanislaus, the Tuolumne, the Merced. Greenwood insisted on working north into the country where he had found gold, along all the tributaries of the Sacramento. Even then, too, before the great year of '49 had dawned, prospectors were pushing to the head of the creeks making into the American Fork, the Feather River, all the larger and lesser streams heading on the west slopes of the Sierras. And Greenwood even heard of a band of men who had stolen away from the lower diggings and broken off to the north and east, some said, heading far up for the Trinity, though that was all unproved country so far as most knew. And now the hatred in Woodhull's sullen heart grew hotter still, for he heard that not 50 miles ahead there had passed a quiet, dark young man, riding a black Spanish horse, with him a bearded man who drove a little band of loaded mules. Their progress, so came the story, was up a valley whose head was impassable. The trail could not be obliterated back of them. They were in a trap of their own choosing. All that he needed was patience and caution. Ships and wagon trains came in on the Willamette from the east. They met the coast news of gold. Men of Oregon also left in a mad stampede for California. News came that all the world now was in the mines of California. All over the east, as the later ships also brought in reiterated news, the mad craze of '49 even then was spreading. But the men of '48 were in ahead. From them, scattering like driven game among the broken country over hundreds of miles of forest, plain, benchland, and valleylands, no word could come out to the waiting world. None might know the countless triumphs, the unnumbered tragedies. None ever did know. There, beyond the law, one man might trail another with murder stronger than avarice in his heart, and none ever be the wiser. To hide secrets such as these, the unfathomed mountains reached out their shadowy arms. Now the winter wore on with such calendar as altitude, latitude, longitude gave it, and the spring of '49 came, east and west, in Washington and New York, at Independence on the Missouri, at Deseret by the Great Salt Lake, in California, in Oregon. Above the land of the early Willamette settlements, 40 or 50 miles up the Yamhill Valley, so a letter from Mrs. Caleb Price to her relatives in Ohio said, "The Wingates, leaders of the train, had a beautiful farm, nearby the Cale Price Mill as it was known. They had up a good house of 5 rooms, and their cattle were increasing now. They had 40 acres in wheat, with what help the neighbors had given in housing and planting, and wheat would run 50 bushels to the acre there. They bought young trees for an orchard. Her mother had planted roses. They now were fine. She believed they were as good as those she planted in Portland, when first she went through there. Cuttings she had carried with her seed wheat in the bureau drawer, all the way across from the Saginaw. Yes, Jesse Wingate and his wife had done well. Molly, their daughter, was still living with them and still unmarried, she believed. There were many things which Mrs. Caleb Price believed, also many things she did not mention. She said nothing, for she knew nothing, of a little scene between these two as they sat on their little sawnboard porch before their door one evening, looking out over the beautiful and varied landscape that lay spread before them. Their wheat was in the green now. Their hogs reveled in their little clover field. "We've done well, Jesse," at length said portly Molly Wingate. "Look at our place. A mile square for nothing. We've done well, Jesse. I'll admit it." "For what?" answered Jesse Wingate. "What's it for? What has it come to? What's it all about?" He did not have any reply. When he turned, he saw his wife wiping tears from her hard-lined face. "It's Molly," said she. Chapter 42. Kit Carson Rides. Following the recession of the snow, men began to push westward up the Platte in the great spring gold rush of 1849. In the forefront of these, outpacing them in his tireless fashion, now passed westward the greatest traveler of his day, the hunter and scout, Kit Carson. The new post of Fort Kearny on the Platte, the old one, Fort Laramie in the foothills of the Rockies. He touched them soon as the grass was green, and as the sun warmed the bunch-grass slopes of the North Platte and the Sweetwater, so that his horses could paw out a living, he crowded on westward. He was a month ahead of the date for the wagon trains at Fort Bridger. "How, Chardon?" said he as he drove in his 2 light packs, riding alone as was his usual way, evading Indian eyes as he of all men best knew how. "How, Kit? You're early! Why?" The trader's chief clerk turned to send a boy for Vasquez, Bridger's partner. "Light, Kit, and eat." "Where's Bridger?" demanded Carson. "I've come out of my country to see him. I have government mail, for Oregon." "For Oregon? Mon Dieu. But Jim," he spread out his hands. "Jim, he's dead, we'll think. We do not known. Now we know the gold news. Maybe so, we know why Jim he's gone." "Gone? When?" "Las Agosto Settembre. Holivan at once he'll took the trail after the hemigrant train last year. He'll caught him hon Fort Hall, Will heard. But then he go hon with those hemigrant beyond Hall, beyond the fork for Californ. He'll not come back. No one know what has become of Jim. He'll been dead, maybe so. Yes, maybe so not. That old rat knows his way through the mountains and he'll take his own time. You think he did not go on to California? We'll know he'll didn't." Carson stood and thought for a time. "Well, it's bad for you, Chardon." "How you mean, Monsieur Kit?" "Eat your last square meal, saddle your best horse, drive 4 packs and 2 saddle mounts along." "We? And where?" "To Oregon." "To Oregon? Sacré fan, what you mean?" "By authority of the government, I command you to carry this packet on to Oregon this season, as fast as safety may allow. Take a man with you, too. Pick up any help you need, but go through. I cannot go further west myself, for I must get back to Laramie. I had counted on Jim, and Jim's post must see me through. Make your own plans to start tomorrow morning. I'll arrange all that with Vasquez. But Monsieur Kit, I cannot." "But you shall, you must, you will. If I had a better man, I'd send him, but you are to do what Jim wants done." "Mais, oui, of course." "Yes, and you'll do what the President of the United States commands." "Bon Dieu, Kit. That packet is over the seal of the United States of America, Chardon. It carries the signature of the President. It was given to the Army to deliver. The Army has given it to me. I give it to you, and you must go. It is for Jim. He would know. It must be placed in the hands of the circuit judge acting under the laws of Oregon, whoever he may be and wherever. Find him in the Willamette country. Your pay will be more than you think, Chardon. Jim would know. Dead or alive, you do this for him. You can do 30 miles a day. I know you as a mountain man. Ride. Tomorrow I start east to Laramie, and you start west for Oregon." And in the morning following, 2 riders left Bridger's for the trail. They parted, each waving a hand to the other. Chapter 43. The Killer Killed. A rough, low cabin of logs, hastily thrown together, housed through the winter months of the Sierra foothills, the 2 men who now, in the warm days of early June, sat by the primitive fireplace cooking a midday meal. The older man, thin, bearded, who now spun a side of venison ribs on a cord in front of the open fire, was the mountain man, Bill Jackson, as anyone might tell whoever had seen him, for he had changed but little. That his companion, younger, bearded, dressed also in buckskins, was Will Banion, it would have taken closer scrutiny even of a friend to determine. So much had the passing of these few months altered him in appearance and in manner. Once light of mien, now he smiled never at all. For hours he would seem to go about his duties as an automaton. He spoke at last to his ancient and faithful friend, kindly as ever, and with his own alertness and decision. "Let's make it our last meal on the Trinity, Bill. What do you say?" "Why? What's eatin' you, boy? Gettin' restless again?" "Yes, I want to move. Most does." "We've got enough, Bill. The last month has been a crime. The spring snows uncovered a fortune for us, and you know it." "Oh yes, 800 in one day ain't bad for two men that never had saw a gold pan a year ago. But she ain't petered yit. With what we've learned and what we know, we can stay in here and get so rich that hit shore makes me cry to think of trappin' beaver, even before 1836, when the beaver market busted. Why, Rich, we'll hit's like you say, plumb wrong. We done hit so damned easy. I lay awake nights plannin' how to spend my share of this pile. We must have $50,000–$60,000 of dust buried under the floor, don't you think?" "Yes, more. But if you'll agree, I'll sell this claim to the company below us and let them have the rest. They offer 50,000 flat, and it's enough, more than enough. I want two things: to get Jim Bridger his share safe and sound, and I want to go to Oregon." The old man paused in the act of splitting off a deer rib from his roast. "You're one awful damn fool, ain't you, Will? I did hope ter finish up here, a brilin' my meat in a yaller gold fireplace. But no matter how plain and simple a man's tastes is, allus something comes along ter bust 'em up." "Well, go on and finish your meal in this plain fireplace of ours, Bill. It has done us very well. I think I'll go down to the sluice a while." Banyan rose and left the cabin, stooping at the low door. Moodily he walked along the side of the steep ravine to which the little structure clung. Below him lay the ripped open slope where the little stream had been diverted. Below again lay the bared bed of the exploited watercourse, floored with boulders set in deep gravel, at times with seamy dams of flat rock lying under and across the gravel stretches. The bedrock, ages old, holding in its hidden fingers the rich secrets of immemorial time. Here he and his partner had in a few months of strenuous labor, taken from the narrow and unimportant rivulet, more wealth than most could save in a lifetime of patient and thrifty toil. Yes, fortune had been kind, and it all had been so easy, so simple, so unagitating, so matter-of-fact. The hillside now looked like any other hillside, innocent as a woman's eyes, yet covering how much. Banyan could not realize that now, young though he was a rich man. He climbed down the side of the ravine, the little stones rattling under his feet, until he stood on the bared floor of the bedrock, which had proved so unbelievably prolific in coarse gold. There was a sharp bend in the ravine, and here the unpaid toil of the little waterway had, ages long, carried and left especially deep strata of gold-shot gravel. As he stood, half musing, Will Banyan heard, on the ravine side around the bend, the tinkle of a falling stone, lazily rolling from one impediment to another. It might be some deer or other animal, he thought. He hastened to get view of the cause, whatever it might be. And then fate, chance, the goddess of fortune which some men say does not exist, but which all wilderness-goers know does exist, for one instant paused, with Will Banyan's life and wealth and happiness lightly a balance in cold, disdainful fingers. He turned the corner. Almost level with his own, he looked into the eyes of a crawling man who, stooped, one hand steadying himself against the slant of the ravine, the other below, carrying a rifle, was peering frowningly ahead. It was an evil face, bearded, aquiline, not unhandsome, but evil in its plain meaning now. The eyes were narrowed, the full lips drawn close, as though some tense emotion now approached its climax. The appearance was that of strain, of nerves stretched in some purpose long sustained. And why not? When a man would do murder, when that has been his steady and premeditated purpose for a year, waiting only for opportunity to serve his purpose, that purpose itself changes his very lineaments, alters his whole cast of countenance. Other men avoid him, knowing unconsciously what is in his soul, because of what is written on his face. For months most men had avoided Woodhull. It was known that he was on a manhunt. His questions, his movements, his changes of locality showed that. And Woodhull was one of those who cannot avoid a severance, needing it for their courage's sake. Now morose and brooding, now loudly profane, now laughing or now aloof, his errand in these unknown hills was plain. Well, he was not alone among men whose depths were loosed. Sometime his hour might come. It had come. He stared now full into the face of his enemy. He at last had found him. Here stood his enemy, unarmed, delivered into his hands. For one instant the two stood, staring into one another's eyes. Banyan's advance had been silent. Woodhull was taken as much unawares as he. It had been Woodhull's purpose to get a stand above the sluices, hidden by the angle, where he could command the reach of the stream bed where Banyan and Jackson last had been working. He had studied the place before and meant to take no chances. His shot must be sure. But now, in his climbing on the steep hillside, his rifle was in his left hand downhill, and his footing, caught as he was with one foot half raised, was insecure. At no time these last 4 hours had his opportunity been so close, or so poor, as precisely now. He saw Will Banyan's eyes, suddenly startled, quickly estimating, looking into his own. He knew that behind his own eyes his whole foul soul lay bared, the soul of a murderer. Woodhull made a swift spring down the hill, scrambling, half erect, and caught some sort of stance for the work which now was his to do. He snarled, for he saw Banyan stoop, unarmed. It would do his victim no good to run. There was time even to exult, and that was much better in a long-deferred matter such as this. "Now, damn you, I've got you!" He gave Banyan that much chance to see that he was now to die. Half leaning, he raised the long rifle to its line and touched the trigger. The report came, and Banyan fell. But even as he wheeled and fell, stumbling down the hillside, his flung arm apparently had gained a weapon. It was not more than the piece of rotten quartz he had picked up and planned to examine later. He flung it straight at Woodhull's face, an act of chance, of instinct. By a hair it saved him. Firing and missing at a distance of 50 feet, Woodhull remained not yet a murderer indeed. In a flash, Banyan gathered and sprang toward him as he stood in a half-second of consternation at seeing his victim fall and rise again. The rifle carried but the one shot. He flung it down, reached for his heavy knife, raising an arm against the second piece of rock which Banyan flung as he closed. He felt his wrist caught in an iron grip, felt the blood gush where his temple was cut by the last missile. And then once more, on the narrow bared floor that but now was patterned in parquetry traced in yellow, and soon must turn to red, it came to man and man between them, and it was free. They fell and stumbled, so that neither could much damage the other at first. Banyan knew he must keep the impounded hand back from the knife sheath, or he was done. Thus close, he could make no escape. He fought fast and furiously, striving to throw, to bend, to beat back the body of a man almost as strong as himself, and now a maniac in rage and fear. The sound of the rifle shot rang through the little defile. To Jackson, shaving off bits of sweet meat between thumb and knife blade, it meant the presence of a stranger, friend or foe, for he knew Banyan had carried no weapon with him. His own long rifle he snatched from its pegs. At a long, easy lope, he ran along the path which carried across the face of the ravine. His moccasined feet made no sound. He saw no one in the creek bed, or at the long turn, but knew there came a loud, wordless cry, which he knew was meant for him. It was Will Banyan's voice. The two struggling men grappled below him had no notion of how long they had fought. It seemed an age, and the denouement yet another age deferred. But to them came the sound of a voice. "Get away, Will! Stand back!" It was Jackson. They both, still gripped, looked up the bank. The long barrel of a rifle, foreshortened to a black point, above it a cold eye, fronted and followed them as they swayed. The crooked arm of the rifleman was motionless, save as it just moved that deadly circle an inch this way, an inch back again. Banyan knew that this was murder too, but he knew that naught on earth could stay it now. To guard as much as he could against a last desperate knife, thrust even of a dying man, he broke free and sprang back as far as he could, falling prostrate on his back as he did so, tripped by an unseen stone. But Sam Woodhull was not upon him now, was not willing to lose his own life in order to kill. For just one instant, he looked up at the death staring down on him, then turned to run. There was no place where he could run. The voice of the man above him called out sharp and hard. Halt! Sam Woodhull, look at me! He did turn, in horror, in fascination at sight of the bright angel. The rifle barrel to his last gaze became a small, round circle, large as a bottle top, and around it shone a fringed aura of red and purple light. That might have been the eye. Steadily, as when he had held his friend's life in his hand, sighting 5 inches above his eyes, the old hunter drew now above the eyes of his enemy. When the dry report cut the confined air of the valley, the body of Sam Woodhull started forward. The small blue hole an inch above the eyes showed the murderer's manhunt done. Chapter 44. Yet If Love Lack. Winding down out of the hills into the grassy valley of the upper Sacramento, the little pack train of Banyan and Jackson, 6 hardy mules beside the black horse and Jackson's mountain pony, picked its way along a gashed and trampled creek bed. The kayaks which swung heavy on the strongest 2 mules might hold salt or lead or gold. It all was one to any who might have seen, and the 2 silent men, the younger ahead, the older behind, obviously were men able to hold their counsel or to defend their property. The smoke of a distant encampment caught the keen eye of Jackson as he rode, humming, carefree, the burden of a song. "Oh, then, Susanna," admonished the old mountain man, and bade the said Susanna to be as free of care as he himself then and there was. "More men comin' in," said he presently. "Wonder who them people is, and if it's peace or war. 3 men, a horse band, 2 Indians. Goin' easy, Bill." Banyan slowed down his own gait. His companion had tied the 6 mules together, nose and tail, with the halter of the lead mule wrapped on his own saddle horn. Each man now drew his rifle from the swing loop. But they advanced with the appearance of confidence, for it was evident that they had been discovered by the men of the encampment. Apparently they were identified as well as discovered. A tall man in leggings and moccasins, a flat felt hat over his long gray hair, stood gazing at them, his rifle butt resting on the ground. Suddenly he emitted an unearthly yell, whether of defiance or of greeting, and springing to his own horse's picket pin gathered in the lariat, and mounting bareback came on, his rifle high above his head, and repeating again and again his war cry or salutation. Jackson rose in his stirrups, dropped his lead line, and forsook more than $150,000, some 2 mule pack loads of gold. His own yell rose high in answer. "I told ye all the world'd be here," he shouted back over his shoulder. "Do we see that old thief Jim Bridger? Him I left drunk and happy last summer? Now what in hell brung him here?" The 2 old mountain men flung off and stood hand in hand before Banyan had rescued the precious lead line and brought on the little train. Bridger threw his hat on the ground, flung down his rifle and cast his stoic calm aside. Both his hands caught Banyan's, and his face beamed, breaking into 1,000 lines. "Boy, hit's you then. I knowed your hoss. He has no like in these parts. I've traced you by him this 100 miles below and up again, but I've had no word this 2 weeks. Mostly I've seed that, when ye ain't lookin' for a bar, there he is. Well, here we air, fine and fattin', and me with 2 bottles left of somethin' they call cognac down in Yerba Buena. Come on in, and we'll make medicine." They dismounted. The 2 Indians, short, deep-chested, bow-legged men, went to the packs. They gruntled as they unloaded the 2 larger mules. The kayaks were lined up and the mantas spread over them, the animals led away for feed and water. Bridger produced a ham of venison, some beans, a bannock, and some coffee, not to mention his 2 bottles of fiery fluid, before any word was passed regarding future plans or past events. "Come here, Jim," said Jackson after a time, tin cup in hand. The other followed him, likewise equipped. "Heft this pannier, Jim." "Uh-huh." "Well, what of hit? What's inter hit?" "Not much, Jim. Just 300-400 pounds of gold settin' there in them 4 packs. Hit hain't much, but hit'll help some." Bridger stooped and uncovered the kayaks, unbuckled the cover straps. "Hit's a true fack!" he exclaimed. "Gold! F hit hain't, I'm a putrefied liar, and that's all I got to say." Now, little by little, they told, each to other, the story of the months since they had met. Bridger first explaining his own movements. "I left the Malheur at Boise and brung along yen 2 boys. Ye needn't be a-skeered they'll touch the cargo. The gold means nothin' ter 'em, but horses does. We've got a good band to drive north now. Some we bought and most they stole. but no rancher cares for horses here and now. We come through the Klamaths, you see, and on south, the old horse trail up from the Spanish country, which only the Injuns knows. My boys say they can take us to the head of the Willamette. So you did get the gold, eh, sir? Said Bridger, his eyes narrowing. The tip the gal give you was a good one? Yes, rejoined Banyan, but we came near losing it and more. It was Woodhull, Jim. He followed us in. Yes, I know. His wagons was not fur behind ye on the Humboldt. He left right atter ye did. He made trouble, huh? He'll make no more? Is that hit, huh? Bill Jackson slapped the stock of his rifle in silence. Bridger nodded. He had been close to tragedies all his life. They told him now of this one. He nodded again, close-lipped. "And you want courts and the settlements, boys?" said he. "For me, when I kill a rattler, that's enough. If you're touchy and want your record clean, why, we can go below and fix hit. Only thing is, I don't want to waste no more time than I can help, for some of them horses has a record that ain't maybe so plumb clean their own selves. Ye ain't going out east, you're going north. Hit's easier, and a month or two closter, with plenty of feed and water. The old Cayuse trail, huh?" "So Sam Woodhull got what he's been looking for so long," he added presently. "Well, that simples up things some. He'd a got hit long ago on the Platte, if my partner hadn't been a damned fool," confirmed Jackson. "He was where we could a buried him natural, in the sands. I told Will then that Woodhull'd murder him the fust chance that he got. Well, he did, or if he didn't hit wasn't no credit to either one of them two." "What differ does hit make, Bill?" remarked Bridger indifferently. "Let bygones be bygones, huh? That's the pleasantest way, since he's dead. Now here we air, with all the gold there ever was molded, and a hull 2 bottles of cognac left, which takes Holty innermost better 'n Hudson's Bay rum. Ain't it a purty leetle old world to play with, all with nice pink stripes around hit?" He filled his tin and broke into a roaring song. There was a old widder which had 3 sons, Joshua, James, and John, and one got shot, and one got drowned, and the last and got losted and never was found. "Ain't hit funny, son," said he, turning to Banyan with cup uplifted. "How stiff liquor Alice makes me remember what I done forgot." Now Kit told me that at Laramie. "Fair, I'm going out to Oregon with my washpan on my knee," chanted Bill Jackson, now solemnly oblivious of most of his surroundings, and hence not consciously discourteous to his friends. "Susanna, don't ye cry." They sat, the central figures of a scene wild enough, in a world still primitive and young. Only one of the 3 remained sober and silent, wondering, if one thing lacked, why the world was made. Chapter 45. The Light of the Whole World. At the new farm of Jesse Wingate on the Yamhill, the wheat was in stack and ready for the flail, his deerskin sacks made ready to carry it to market after the threshing. His grim and weather-beaten wagon stood now unused at the barnyard fence of rails. It was evening. Wingate and his wife again sat on their little stoop, gazing down the path that led to the valley road. A mounted man was opening the gate, someone they did not recognize. "Maybe from below," said Molly Wingate. "Jed's maybe sent up another letter. Leave it to him, he's going to marry the most wonderful girl. Well, I'll call it true, she's a wonderful walker. All the prices was. Or maybe it's for Molly," she added. She's ever heard a word from either Sam Woodhull or—" "Hush! I do not want to hear that name," broke in her husband. "Trouble enough he has made for us." His wife made no comment for a moment, still watching the stranger, who was now riding up the long approach, little noted by Wingate as he sat, moody and distrait. "Jess," said she, "let's be fair and shame the devil. Maybe we don't know all the truth about Will Banyan. You go in the house. I'll tend to this man, whoever he may be." But she did not. With one more look at the advancing figure, she herself rose and followed her husband. As she passed, she cast a swift glance at her daughter, who had not joined them for the twilight hour. Hers was the look of the mother, maternal, solicitious, yet wise and resolved withal. Woman understanding woman, and now was the hour for her ewe-lamb to be alone. Molly Wingate sat in her own little room, looking through her window at the far forest and the mountain peaks in their evening dress of many colors. She was no longer the tattered emigrant girl in fringed frock and mended moccasins. Ships from the world's great ports served the new market of the Columbia Valley. It was a trim and trig young woman in the habiliments of sophisticated lands who sat here now. Her heavy hair, piled high, lighted warmly in the illumination of the window. Her skin, clear white, had lost its sunburn in the moister climate between the two ranges of mountains. Quiet, reticent, reserved, cold, some said. But all said Molly Wingate, teacher at the mission school, was beautiful, the most beautiful young woman in all the great Willamette settlements. Her hands were in her lap now, and her face as usual was grave. A sad young woman, her Oregon lovers all said of her. They did not know why she should be sad, so fit for love was she. She heard now a knock at the front door, to which, from her position, she could not have seen anyone approach. She called out, "Come!" but did not turn her head. A horse stamped, neighed near her door. Her face changed expression. Her eyes grew wide in some strange association of memories suddenly revived. She heard a footfall on the gallery floor, then on the floor of the hall. It stopped. Her heart almost stopped with it. Some undiscovered sense warned her, cried aloud to her. She faced the door, wide-eyed, as it was flung open. "Molly!" Will Banion's deep-toned voice told her all the rest. In terror, her hands to her face, she stood an instant, then sprang toward him, her voice almost a wail in its incredulous joy. "Will! Will! Oh, Will! Oh, oh! Molly!" They both paused. "It can't be. Oh, you frightened me, Will. It can't be you." But he had her in his arms now. At first he could only push back her hair, stroke her cheek, until at last the rush of life and youth came back to them both, and their lips met in the sealing kiss of years. Then both were young again. She put up a hand to caress his brown cheek. Tenderly he pushed back her hair. "Will, oh Will, it can't be," she whispered again and again. "But it is. It had to be. Now I'm paid. Now I've found my fortune. And I've had my year to think it over, Will, as though the fortune mattered. Not so much as that one other thing that kept you and me apart. Now I must tell you—" No, let be. Tell me nothing. Will, aren't you here?" "But I must. You must hear me. I've waited 2 years for this." "Long, Will? You've let me get old." "You old?" He kissed her in contempt of time. "But now wait, dear, for I must tell you. You see, coming up the valley, I met the clerk of the court of Oregon City, and he knew I was headed up for the Yamhill. He asked me to serve as his messenger. I've been sending up through all the valley settlements in search of one William Banion," he said to me. Then I told him who I was. He gave me this. "What is it?" She turned to her lover. He held in his hands a long package, enfolded in an otter skin. "Is it a court summons for Will Banion? They can't have you, Will." He smiled, her head held between his 2 hands. "I have a very important document for Colonel William Banion," the clerk said to me. "It has been for some time in our charge, for delivery to him at once should he come into the Oregon settlements. It is from His Excellency, the President of the United States. Such messages do not wait. Seeing it of such importance, and knowing it to be military, Judge Lane opened it, since we could not trace the addressee. If you like, if you are indeed Colonel William Banion." That was what he said. He broke off, choking. "Ah, Molly, at last, and indeed I am again William Banion." He took from the otter skin, which Chardon once had placed over the oilskin used by Carson to protect it, the long and formal envelope of heavy linen. His finger pointed, "On the service of the United States." "Why, Will?" He caught the envelope swiftly to his lips, holding it there an instant before he could speak. "My pardon. From the President. Not guilty. Oh, not guilty. And I never was." "Oh, Will. That makes you happy?" "Doesn't it you?" "Why, yes, but I knew that always, and I know now that I'd have followed you to the gallows if that had had to be." "Though I were a thief?" "Yes. But I'd not believe it. I didn't. I never did. I could not. You'd take my word against all the world. Just my word if I told you it wasn't true? You'd want no proof at all? Will you always believe in me in that way? No proof?" "I want none now. You do tell me that?" No, no. I'm afraid you'd give me proofs. I want none. I want to love you for what you are, for what we both are, Will. I'm afraid. He put his hands on her shoulders, held her away arm's length, looked straight into her eyes. Dear girl, said he, you need never be afraid anymore. She put her head down contentedly against his shoulder, her face nestling sidewise, her eyes closed, her arms again quite around his neck. I don't care, Will, said she. No, no, don't talk of things. He did not talk. In the sweetness of the silence he kissed her tenderly again and again. And now the sun might sink. The light of the whole world by no means died with it. The end. Best audiobooks for free hopes that you have enjoyed this production of The Covered Wagon by Emerson Hough. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble, as your subscription is the support we need to create more great free content. Please look to our website at bestaudiobooksforfree.com for a complete list of our audiobooks.